everybody, and welcome to another episode of JavaScript Jabber. This week on our panel, we have Steve Edwards.
Hello from Portland again.
I'm Charles Max Wood from devchat.tv. We're doing two this week. I'm still kind of excited about the book launch, so go check it out, The Max Coder's Guide to Finding Your Dream Developer Job. This week, we have a special guest, and that's Noah, the Svelte Master.
Hi there, from San Francisco.
This episode is sponsored by Hasura.io. Hasura is an open-source GraphQL engine that helps you instantly set up a scalable and real-time GraphQL backend. Hasura makes your team super productive by dynamically composing a schema backed by databases and microservices that you can securely query from front-end clients. You can check it out at Hasura.io to try it out in 30 seconds. Now, a few things that I really like about Hasura. One is that it runs on PostgreSQL, which is really easy for me to get set up. It has a core authorization engine that makes the data access secure and doesn't compromise performance. It can also join together GraphQL services, so if you have microservices or SaaS APIs like OneGraph, you can pull them in as well. And finally, they've been working on making it super easy for developers to write custom business logic in REST APIs and have Hasura expose them as GraphQL mutations. So go check it out, Hasura.io. They're doing really great stuff. So, Noah, do you want to just introduce yourself real quick, let people know what they should know about you?
Yeah, sure. I grew up in Indiana, Goshen, Indiana, near Elkhart, South Bend. I recently moved to San Francisco, and right now I have been given the title of Computational Linguist by SoundHound, which is a speech recognition and understanding company. And yeah, that's about it.
So have you ever heard the phrase land of Goshen used a lot?
No, I haven't, actually.
Oh my gosh.
I know the reference, yeah.
Okay, good.
I don't know if I know the reference. Is it a biblical reference or is it something else?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's kind of a Mennonite town.
Well, yeah, Goshen was also the area of Egypt that was given to the Israelites when they moved there.
Right, that's
Gotcha.
good.
I was just wondering because we were talking about movies before. I'm like, is there a movie reference that I'm missing? So,
Right.
Yeah, 10 Commandments, I guess, if you want to do it
there you
that
go.
way.
Yeah. All right, cool. Well, you have a YouTube channel,
Right.
Svelte Master. Do you want to talk a little bit about how that came about? And we can dive into what Svelte is and why people should care.
So I was kind of looking for a project to start working on, and I had been reading like marketing books and kind of trying to figure out what I could do. And Svelte came out, and I really liked it. And what I had read was that you want to sort of get in early, you want to specialize, and you want to pick like an authoritative name. So I started making Svelte videos, and I tried to make them as short as possible, so you can just look up a feature, watch it in a few minutes, and get going. And it's more towards intermediates, since I myself am more of an intermediate developer.
Right.
Which I think is important to have as well, because there's a lot of beginners out there that just get talked over by more advanced people. That's what it's doing.
Nice. We'll make sure we get a link to that in the show notes because there's a ton of interesting stuff going on in the Svelte community. Before the call, Steve and I were talking, and it turns out that Joe Eames has been talking to both of us about Svelte as well. I don't know what he's been saying to you, but he sounds like Svelte is going to take over everything, like all the things.
Yeah, that's the impression I got too. Something about ruling the world or killing all the other ones or along those lines.
I've been pretty interested in, how is that going to work? So,
well, I was also mentioning one of the other podcasts I listened to, and yes, Chuck, sorry, I listen to other podcasts too, Syntax FM with Wes Boss and Scott Tilinsky, and they did a whole episode on Svelte where they just looked at it. They didn't interview or talk to anybody. They were just looking at it and thinking, yeah, this looks pretty cool, or yeah, this seems sort of weird, I'm not sure what this is about, but just between the two of them. And then Scott Tilinsky came back. He says, oh my gosh, this is so awesome. I'm doing a course on it. So Level Up Tutorials, he has a course for Svelte for beginners. And I actually signed up here this past week and been working through it myself. And it is really pretty, there's a few things that are different than what I'm used to, but it's just a matter of learning them. But it's very simple and basic and small, in terms of its footprint.
Yep.
Right. Yeah, I think it used to market itself more as a compiler and how it would be a smaller bundle for the client. But I think it's turning into more of like a better development experience since you write less code. And for me, yeah, it's just a lot more enjoyable to write in.
All right. So let's back up because we're kind of getting to the point where people who don't know what it's about, don't know what Svelte is, are going to be going, all right, so what are you talking about? So what is Svelte?
So first of all, Svelte is a kind of like a JavaScript framework, but some people don't like the framework word. They call it a compiler. So it's similar to React and Vue. You write components, and then Svelte will compile it into vanilla JavaScript, CSS, HTML, and it creates a small bundle that's sent to the client.
All right. So I get it, but I don't get it.
So does the compile happen at a different point in time than, say, with Vue, React, Angular? Or what's the process? How is the process those different?
Yeah, so the compile time is like as you're developing, or you run npm run build and then it'll create a package. So without the framework with it. And then you send this compiled JavaScript, HTML, CSS to the client.
So essentially what you're saying is I write all my code in Svelte.
Yeah.
It runs the compiler. And what I get back is a series of DOM APIs put together in a way that make it do what I wanted it to do. So there's no actual like Svelte dot do the thing in the end result.
Right. It's kind of called the disappearing framework. So It's not supposed to be there when you send it.
Got it. That makes sense. Because, one thing that I've run into with pretty much all of the other frameworks, React, Vue, and Angular, is that, they tend to ship with, they do tree shaking and stuff, right? So you don't necessarily ship with the whole framework, but all of your code calls back into the framework libraries. And it sounds like here, the framework library just tells it what to compile to vanilla JS without the framework in place when you get the final result.
Right. Yeah.
That is very interesting. We're talking about bundle size, right? Bundle size and speed. So what are the differences in bundle size and speed between this and some of the other frameworks then?
Yeah, so I was just looking at a video, and if you ship just a Hello World app, then I think the bundle size is 300 lines of code. So that's the smallest possible bundle size. So from the real world app, they wrote a bunch of apps in different frameworks, and the bundle size for the Svelte one was 9.7 kilobytes, whereas Vue was 41.8. React with Redux was 193, Angular 149, Angular JS 317.
Wow. That's a lot smaller.
Yeah, significantly smaller.
So it's taking since it compiles down to just plain vanilla JS, so is that sort of the Babel type of approach, I guess, where you're taking ES6 and you compile it so that it can be understood by older browsers as well, or is there a difference between the two processes?
Yeah, I believe so. Just in the compile step, it strips out all ES6 and makes it runnable on all browsers.
Okay.
That makes sense. If you're running ES6 or running like TypeScript or something else, do you have to compile the TypeScript to ES6 or ES5 and then compile that? Or how does that all work? Or do you typically just write in ES6?
Yeah, typically ES6. I'm not sure. So TypeScript, they're working on adding support for it in Svelte built in. There are some third-party libraries right now, but I'm not sure exactly how they work.
Interesting. Yeah, I'd have to look at that. It'd be interesting to just dive into and see. So as far as speed, since you're not calling into a third-party library that may have other overhead, is it faster?
Yeah.
Everybody cares about this number, right?
Right, yeah. So again, if I just reference this article that was written on comparison, it has a performance from 0 to 100. I'm not sure what that number is exactly, but Svelte's at 91, whereas Vue is at 94, and then a few of them are at 99.
Okay.
So I think it's definitely faster to download, of course, since it's a smaller bundle. Once it's already running, I'm not sure about.
Okay. To a certain degree, as long as it's fast enough, right?
Yeah, that's how I feel.
It doesn't feel like, okay, why am I waiting for this, right? It happens fast enough to where I don't get to that point. Yeah.
Right. And it has, with Sapper, it has routing and everything. It'll do pushing, and so it feels pretty quick.
Yeah, I've seen Sapper mentioned a few places. What is that? Can you give a little details on that?
So Sapper is basically like Dex.js is to React. So it gives you a few things that you would want on your website, like server-side rendering, routing, a server, code splitting, these kind of things.
Oh, is that sort of like Nuxt is to Vue then? Same.
Yeah, exactly.
Same
right.
idea. Oh, okay, gotcha. So now one other difference that I'm noticing that I was mentioning in the course I was doing is that you're using Rollup instead of Webpack. I'm not familiar with Rollup. Do you know the reasoning behind using Rollup and maybe what the benefits are?
Yeah, that's a good question. You can do it with Webpack, but most of it is in Rollup because I guess it's because it's by the same creator. So Rich Harris wrote Rollup. I'm sure there's reasons for why it's used besides that, but it seems like it's just a smoother experience since they're kind of written for each other. But specifically, I don't know what features of Rollup would make it better used for Webpack versus Webpack.
But you could use Webpack instead, couldn't you?
Yeah, you can use Webpack. I usually don't since the Rollup plus Svelte stack is more tested and used.
Yeah, it looks like I'm looking Rollup config.js for the app that I was playing with, and it looks like there's a Svelte plugin.
Right. Yeah, there's more plugins there.
That's interesting. So if you're going to write a plugin for Svelte, then are you essentially writing shortcuts that compile down to the same kind of stuff that Svelte does?
What do you mean by that?
So for example, if you have an Angular plugin, then, it just hooks into like lifecycle and things like that for Angular, or maybe provides functionality on top of what Angular provides. But since Svelte doesn't actually give you, I guess, unless you're using Sapper, how do I put it? So if I'm writing a plugin for Svelte, and let's say that I'm going to plug in some of my own components or something, essentially what I'm writing is I'm writing a compile target for that component.
Right. Okay. So if you want to write some kind of middleware or something that is doing something at compile time, then I guess you would need to do it with Rollup.
I guess that's the thing, right? Is you're writing your plugins against compile time, not against when the app's actually being run.
Right. Because you can still write your plugins as Svelte components, right? And then they'll get imported when you're writing your app and then compiled. Yeah,
that makes sense. So what do Svelte components look like?
Yeah, good question. So they're all single file components. So one component, one file, and vice versa. And it's basically an HTML file. So your JavaScript goes into a script tag, your CSS goes into a style tag, and then your HTML goes just wherever. And the CSS is scoped to the component, and the JavaScript is basically the state of that component. Any variables there is the state.
So in terms of the HTML for the page itself, it's basically anything that's outside the script or the style tags. Is that right?
Yeah, but you could say that the script tag is an HTML file since you can put script and style tags into your HTML, right?
Right. So, well, I'm looking at, some of the Svelte files I've been working with, and these are obviously pretty basic, but I've got, I have a script and I have a style, and then we'd have like a div, and
right.
that was inside the div would be what is actually rendered to the page.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. But that doesn't have to be a div. It could be like a header tag, or it could be any type of HTML. It's not. Okay. Right to understand. Now, in terms of the CSS, correct me if I'm wrong, but you can do global CSS, right? It's not always necessarily scope. So you could put something in your top level Svelte file, and then you do like the modifier.
Yeah.
Global.
Yeah. And you can put that in any component, and it'll make it global.
Okay, that's right. It doesn't have to be top level. It could be anything. It's just going to say, okay, this is global, and it'll apply it globally.
Yeah. So for me, that's sometimes helpful if I have a component and then the parent component wants to change the child component. Usually that doesn't work if it's scoping the CSS, but if you make it global, then you can sort of modify the child from the parent.
And how do you denote that it's global?
It's a : global parentheses, and then you put the selector inside the parentheses.
Oh, interesting. And you just do that in your component and it'll bubble it all the way up?
Yeah. You just put it in the CSS of your component.
And that applies to the entire page, or does it just apply to everything below it?
The entire page. Yeah.
Okay. I'm sure that it does this, but how do you embed components? So let's say that I have like a table with table rows or something.
Right. So in the parent component, you'll put a slot tag. So this is like a Svelte tag. So you put a slot tag, and then whenever you put something inside that component, like whenever you're using it, you've imported it and are using it, and you put something inside it, it'll go into that slot tag.
Gotcha.
Oh, that's a little different because I'm looking at this one where we just did an import, inside the script tag where we imported the child component.
Right.
Import child from child.svelte.
Right. So you can do that, but if you want to let anything be passed to this component as a child by like putting it in between the tags, then you use a slot, if that makes sense. Kind of hard to explain without a...
Oh, so you can't do you can't do like a tag with your child component name and then the brackets with whatever props you're passing to it. So if my child my child component is called question, for instance, so I've imported it, and then in my HTML I've got question bracket. So what I was seeing from this course is you do question, in the brackets, and then within the brackets you do curly braces, and then whatever value you're passing down to your child. That doesn't work as passing props?
Oh, right. Yeah, you can do that. Yeah. That's for props. Yeah, I'm just talking about if you have like a tag, like an open tag, close tag of a component, and then you want to put something inside of the tag, like in between the two tags, right?
Oh, I see. Okay, slots. Yeah, so that's really similar to Vue. In terms of slots and scoped slots. Okay, it's the same idea, right? It's not just a single value, it's a whole bunch of HTML or whatever data you want to put in between those tags.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Okay, right. Yeah, that's very similar.
Right.
Yep. And I'm looking at some of the APIs and stuff, and it seems relatively simple with a lot of this stuff, right? Where you've got basically if each await. And then you've got just some basics on elements and components, and then the rest of it's just building out the system, right? So I'm assuming the learning curve on this isn't terrible.
Yeah. So it's hard for me to tell exactly how simple it is because I had already learned a different framework like React. So when I learned React, I was like, whoa, this is amazing. And then I learned Svelte. And again, I thought, whoa, this is amazing because it was so intuitive and easy. But I don't know if that's because I definitely think it's simpler and more intuitive than other frameworks. But just how intuitive, I'm not sure. For someone coming from either no coding or no JavaScript or no framework ability.
So let me ask you about one of the more technical details again, being the technical person I am. One of the differences that's stressed on the Svelte site is the lack of a virtual DOM use. So it talks about how other sites use a virtual DOM, but it's not really needed. Can you talk about why and how Svelte doesn't use it or what it uses instead?
Right. Yeah, good question. Yeah, I guess because it's just compiling down to JavaScript, it's not sending the framework or anything like that. It doesn't need a virtual DOM. I guess it's just updating as things change. That's
because it's happening because you're sending compiled stuff already as compared to having to do the diff at runtime?
Right. Since it's not really interacting with a library or anything like that on the client.
Okay.
So then let's say that I have a text field out there somewhere and I fill it in and I need it to change 3 or 4 places on my application. How do I handle that then?
One thing you can use is stores, which is kind of like the Redux for React.
Right.
Vuex for Vue. Okay.
Oh yeah, Vuex. Yeah. Yeah, it's much simpler. So you create a store, you say const writable, and then you put in whatever you want your store to be. And then you can import the store in any component anywhere, and you just put a $sign in front of the name of the store, and that lets you either read or write to the store, if that makes sense. So it's kind of like a global variable, but you have to import it into whatever component.
Yeah, I'm looking at the docs for it.
Yeah, there's that, and then there's context, which you can just set context from like a parent component, and then any child can just get context with the same key, and then you have access to whatever was set.
Cool. I really want to go play with this.
Yeah.
So one other thing I wanted to clarify a little bit or talk about is the template syntax. Mm-hmm. So, speaking for Vue, you'll have, your VF or your on clicks and that kind of stuff for doing if statements. Here you're using your curly brackets and then a pound await or a pound if or a colon then or so on. So it's sort of like I haven't done a lot of work with some of the older templating libraries like a Nunjux or a Pug or a Jade or what those types of things, but it looks pretty similar to what I have seen. Is that sort of what it's based on?
Yeah, that's my impression. I was sort of hesitant about it at first. because I liked how React would use the JavaScript to do maps and stuff like that. But yeah, I've grown to like it a lot more. And I think it's similar to older templating engines or frameworks.
So what's your favorite option that you have in Svelte? Because it looks like there's a bunch here. There's, the framework as far as, life cycle. You've got Svelte Store, Svelte Motion, Svelte Transition, which is like fade, blur, fly, Svelte Animate. I mean, there's a lot here.
Right. I guess just overall, I like that I'm writing less code and I'm not writing anything that's unnecessary. So there's no like set state or declaring class React extends or importing the library or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
I like the simplicity of the state management as well. You just declare variables in your component and stores and get context. All of this feels much more intuitive and a lot simpler than it is in other frameworks.
Now, one part that I haven't gotten to that, is always a important part of any framework, at least the one that I've dealt with, has been routing,
Right.
Defining your paths for your different components. How is that handled?
So this is a complaint from some people, which is that there's no official Svelte router if you're just using Svelte. So what I recommend is using Sapper, which has a router built into it. But there is a few Svelte routing libraries that you can use if you don't want to use Sapper. But in general, I think, yes, Sapper is the best choice, and it'll give you routing for you. So for that, in Sapper, you will just define a page component, like index.svelte and then about.svelte. And then kind of like next or next, it'll take those components and turn them into a page with a route.
So if I'm understanding correctly, then for routing, you'd either need to use something like you need to use Sapper or some of the other Svelte routing options that are out there?
Yeah. So there's no official Svelte router for Svelte unless you count Sapper.
Okay.
How much does Sapper add to your bundle size and things like that?
I'm not sure. I don't know that, unfortunately.
Yeah. Well, I'm assuming that it all gets built in with Rollup, right?
Yeah. So right now you can export a Sapper app, and if it is all just a static website, then you can host it on something like Netlify, where you don't need a backend or anything like that. It's also pretty easy to host on Heroku as a Node app because it gives you a server and you can write APIs with it too. It markets itself as being the next small thing in web development. So there's definitely a concentration on keeping the bundle size as small as possible.
Right. Makes sense to me.
Yeah.
Well, and if you're bundling it up with Rollup and you're not using all of the features, I could also see it tree shaking some of that stuff back out.
Yeah, exactly. So that's the nice thing. I guess I don't know about the other frameworks as much, but since it's compiling it for you, it can just not include anything that you don't need, right? In its compile step, which it does anyway.
Yep.
Now, from a development standpoint, at least for VS Code, there's a few plugins extensions out in the marketplace for Svelte already. I think the three that I've added that make a big difference is there's Svelte IntelliSense, and Svelte 3 snippets. So interesting. One of them I was noticing last night that I'm not sure if it's the Svelte. Yeah, it must be the Svelte one that enforces template structure. So like if you go down, for instance, and put your style at the bottom below your script and other HTML, when you save it, it moves the style up to the middle.
Oh, really?
It reordered it. Yeah, it was really sort of interesting.
Because you can put it in any order you want, right? But it seems like script and then style and then HTML is kind of the standard.
Right. So it's interesting how it does, whole scale moving around in your application.
Cool.
Those three plugins actually make, do your highlighting for you and keep things nice and neat and rearranging it helps you keep your code pretty neat.
Oh, okay. Nice. Yeah. I've only have the just regular Svelte syntax highlighting, but I should check those out.
This episode is sponsored by Sentry.io. Recently, I came across a great tool for tracking and monitoring problems in my apps. Then I asked them if they wanted to sponsor the show and allow me to share my experience with you. Sentry provides a terrific interface for keeping track of what's going on with my app. It also tracks releases so I can tell if what I deployed makes things better or worse. They give you full stack traces and as much information as possible about the situation when the error occurred to help you track down the errors. Plus, one thing I love, you can customize the context provided by Sentry. So, if you're looking for specific information about the request, you can provide it. It automatically scrubs passwords and secure information, and you can customize the scrubbing as well. Finally, it has a user feedback system built in that you can use to get information from your users. Oh, and I also love that they support open source to the point where they actually open sourced Sentry if you want to self-host it. Use the code devchat at sentry.io to get 2 months free on Sentry's small plan. That's code devchat at sentry.io. How about testing? How do you test your Svelte apps?
Good question. So with Sapper, kind of template that people use and download, kind of like create React app, it comes with Cypress. And that, I think, is sort of the main way that people will test their Svelte or Sapper apps. Yeah, that is something that's been talked about, kind of a more official way to test. But it seems like Cypress is sort of the default right now.
Gotcha. A couple of other things that I'm wondering about. So part of me thinks this would be really nice to kind of sprinkle into my existing web pages, right? It doesn't look like it takes over the whole page the same way that some of the other frameworks do. And so I'm wondering, how possible is that? And does it play nice with things like jQuery or something else that I might have plugged in there?
I think since it is sort of a unique, it's not a library that you can import since it's doing the compile step. You can use it as a single page, like if you wanted just one page of your website to be in Svelte. But with actually putting multiple, putting Svelte into an existing web page, I don't know if that's possible.
Now, it looks like it's possible the other way around because the Svelte Master on YouTube has a video on adding Vue to Svelte.
Okay. Yeah. I made that video kind of just for fun to play around with it. It wasn't received very well. But technically you can do that if you want to add the entire Vue library into your Svelte app.
What would be the point of doing that? Was that just something to see if it could be done, or is there an actual benefit to adding Vue to Svelte?
Yeah, there's no benefit that I know of. It was just if someone thought of a benefit, if there's something about Vue that you can only do in Vue and you wanted to add that all to your Svelte app, you could. But I'm sure there's some use somewhere, but I don't know of what that would be.
Yeah, I love the comment here that somebody said they were glad they viewed this video.
Oh, geez.
Yeah.
And that was put up by our own Steve Edwards, right?
No, somebody else. But I dig the thought process.
They beat you to the punch, huh?
Yeah, I like
exactly.
That.
I guess what I'm wondering is, let's say that I write a Svelte component and I want to embed it into my web page somewhere. Can I just drop it in? Like just, I want my email form that for whatever reason I wrote in Svelte, I just drop it in the middle of my page and I can use that wherever I want.
Right. I think there is a way to do that. I haven't done that before. I'm not sure how you do it, but I believe it is possible.
Okay. So you're writing apps where Svelte takes over and renders the entire page.
Right. So I've used it mostly for, just single page apps, small projects. I always use Svelte. And that is one thing about Svelte that people, I think, are still kind of nervous about, is whether it works on large applications, whether it scales, I guess, is the question people ask. There hasn't been any big company that has made a huge project with Svelte or Sapper or anything like that.
Gotcha.
But for small projects, it's amazing.
Now, one other thing that I'm wondering about is, okay, let's say it runs the whole page. Obviously, you're going to want to be able to call back to the back end and get data out or push data in, right? I mean, otherwise, it kind of loses a whole lot of functionality that it needs. So how does it manage that? And how do you pull in third-party libraries like Apollo or something?
Yeah, so if you're using Sapper, then it gives you a node server and you can pull those in just like you would any other node application. I had one project that I used Svelte with Django. And since Svelte is just compiling down to HTML, CSS, JavaScript, you can set up your project so that Svelte is just the front end files. So just like any other kind of classic web project.
I guess where I'm heading is like if I set up a content management system on Contentful or something, right? And then I want to pull the articles out of it and display them using Svelte.
Yeah.
So it's a third-party backend even.
Oh, you mean like the backend is like you're running Contentful on the backend?
Yeah, so Contentful's a CMS, software as a service. So essentially you use their system to write all of your content, and then you use something like Apollo or something to make GraphQL queries to the back end. And you make the GraphQL queries to Contentful instead of to, your own backend. And so if you're going to make requests to that, and so for that, I would probably pull in Apollo or something like it, right? And use that to hit the back end. When it compiles, does it just kind of compile around the Apollo stuff?
Yeah, so I guess it would just be compiling the front end aspect, and then so is Apollo on the front end or the?
It's on the front end.
Oh, it is. Okay. Yeah, I'm not sure.
It's like using Relay in React, if you're familiar with that.
Yeah, Chuck. So this little project thing, this quiz project that I'm working through, we have an API, just some demo, data API.
Right.
And we just use async await with a fetch command.
Right.
And it returns, your promise, and then you deal with it from there. And you can handle that. There's a special await template tag that you can use in your HTML, that shows something while it's waiting. And then, there's a then statement. And when you get your data back, then you just go ahead and render it like you would anything else. So it looks, fairly straightforward.
Yeah. And I'll quit asking the same question over and over. But yeah, there's actually, I did my Google homework and it took like 2 seconds. I did a search for Svelte Apollo.
Okay.
And it turns out that there's a plugin for it. And so you
perfect.
just pull it in and then you do your Svelte query or your Apollo query, right? And you tell it what you need and it gets the stuff back. And and then you can use the hash await to essentially wait for it as a promise. And when it comes back, then it actually goes through and like loads in all the stuff that it got. And so, it's pretty much the same process, except instead of calling fetch, like Steve's example, you call query and then you have it build your GraphQL query.
Oh, okay. Nice.
So that's pretty straightforward. I'm liking a lot of the simplicity here. And they've got examples too in this particular repo for how to do it with Sapper if you're doing server-side rendering.
So then I'm assuming then that you can use this with some of from a theming and design standpoint, that you can use it with an external library, whether it's a Bootstrap or a Bulma or even a Tailwind CSS or something like that. Is that pretty straightforward to implement?
Yeah, there's already component libraries for each of those CSS frameworks where you can just import components, or you can, if you're just using the CSS, I think that's fairly straightforward. But if you're using, I think there's Svelma, it's called, there's Svelte Strap, and there's Smelt for Tailwind CSS. I love the names on these. Yeah, so, and I've been using Smelt some, and when you use it, you can just use the Tailwind CSS classes in your component wherever you want.
Does that have a logo of a little smelt fish?
I don't. It looks kind of like Svelte, I think, just with some. What is it? I don't know. Definitely no fish though.
Isn't smelt also
It's like a.
It's a method
metal?
of doing metal. Yeah.
Oh, smelting. Yeah, a process for metal. Oh, it's smelt. SMELTE.
Yeah, is that a fish as well?
Smelt. SMELT. Right.
Okay.
Little fish. So smelt is Svelte and Tailwind. Oh, interesting. With material design. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and there's also just Svelte material components.
But these are sort of like a Beautify or one of those component libraries where it's the underlying library with particular wrappers around them for Svelte.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Nice.
Right.
Have you done anything with Svelte in now? I'm really kind of pushing the envelope here. Anything with Svelte in Electron or anything like that?
Now with Electron, there is a Svelte native that's sort of under development right now. So I've made some videos on Svelte native. You can use it, but it's still kind of not quite production ready.
Oh, nice. Yeah, it looks like it runs on NativeScript. That's cool.
Yeah. And then Sapper, I forget what these are called, but if you make something in Sapper, a little plus will show up on your URL, and then you can like download it as a Chrome app or something.
Nice. I guess that makes sense because you don't have to load in a whole bunch of framework stuff in the plugin. So it should just work with the DOM APIs.
Yeah, true. Yeah.
This is really slick.
It's hard for me to go back to React after using it.
So now, are there things that you can't do in Svelte that you need something like a React or a Vue for, whether it's in terms of scale or specific pieces of functionality?
Yeah, I think the like Redux, there's definitely a place for that type of state management for larger projects. But I think it's just unknown right now for larger projects, whether state management with stores and context will work. I don't see why it wouldn't work, but just because it hasn't been done, it's hard to say. Otherwise, there are sometimes that I would maybe use React is just if there is a React plugin for something like ant design, but otherwise I use Svelte for everything.
You're designing ants in your apps? Those are pretty small.
Yeah. No, the ant design framework, it has React components and it's really nice, but you can't use it in something like Svelte.
Nice. So do they have like a public roadmap for Svelte as far as what they're going to add next?
I don't think there's a public one. I know TypeScript is on the forefront of that list of what comes next.
And when you say TypeScript, are we talking about they're going to adopt TypeScript as a first class, this is the way you do things? Or is it TypeScript as in it's just going to be TypeScript friendly?
Yeah, TypeScript in the sense that you can write in your script component, you can write in TypeScript rather than JavaScript. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's not going to require TypeScript. It's just going to...
Right, I don't think so.
All right.
And then, yeah, Svelte Native, I think, is the other thing that's being worked on quite a bit.
It seems so lightweight, though, that I'm also wondering if at some point they're just going to say, look, it's more or less done, and we're just going to keep maintaining the compiler so that it works with modern browsers.
Right. I know that the strategy is to kind of like Vue, have everything written in-house, so to say, like rather than having a bunch of third-party libraries, they'd prefer to have a like official Svelte plugin for the most useful things. So I can see it expanding on that front a lot.
Right.
And also, hopefully with transitions and animations, there'll be a lot more added to that.
Yeah, Vue's done a lot in the department of expanding to official stuff. And so, and in some ways it's nice because it's like, what am I going to reach for? Well, I'll go reach for the thing that Vue team built to run with Vue. And then, if that doesn't work for me for whatever reason, then I'll go explore some of the other options.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's also nice since it's a compiler, anything that's added on, you can pretty much add as much on as you want to the framework, and it'll only be put in if you actually use it.
Yeah. So if somebody wanted to start a new app in Svelte, what do? Do they just create a project and then just start writing Svelte files, or is there a CLI, or how does that go?
Yeah, so the basic workflow is dgit. This is another sort of in the Rich Harris created category. So dgit, which just kind of copies a Git repository. And then there's a Svelte.js/template, and then you name your template, change directory into it, npm install, npm run dev, and then it's up and running and ready to go.
Now you installed that with npx, right? Or is that only one up? That's how I installed it when I did mine.
You can install dgit globally. That's what I did. And then I just, or with npx.
Oh, so dgit is the command line tool itself, like the Vue CLI or the Angular CLI?
No, it's not an official one, or all it does is copy a GitHub repository.
Okay.
And then you have the Svelte.js template, which you can add components to. And it's kind of like create React app, but it's just a Git repository of a Svelte.js project template. And you can do that with Sapper as well. Another thing you can do, one thing that I'm hoping to get into the website is they've got a REPL where you can write your Svelte project and it like shows up on the page. And then you can download it and it downloads as a zip and then you can unzip it. So that's one way to start. But I'm hoping that we can add in a way so you write your Svelte on this REPL and then download it, and it has pre-compiled files that you can just upload to Netlify. So for people that aren't as tech savvy, they can just sort of write their project in the REPL and then deploy it to Netlify without having to use the command line.
Yeah, so I see the REPL on the Svelte site now.
Yeah.
So that's working. So the functionality that's missing is just that last part you mentioned?
Yeah, so you can download it and keep developing in local. It's just that when you download it, you need to run npm run build from the command line or npm run dev. But in the future, I'm hoping it can just download and then you just drag and drop a public folder into Netlify or something like that. So another big goal, I think, of Svelte that I'm hoping and have kind of heard is that it makes it easier and more approachable for non-technical people or people coming from maybe less JavaScript background, which I think, it does a good job of just being more intuitive and writing less complex code, right?
Yes, beginner friendly is always good.
Yeah.
Yep. Cool. Well, is there anything else we should talk about here, or should we get to some picks?
I think I've asked all my questions.
All right. Well, then, Noah, if people want to find you online or connect with you in some way, where do they go?
Yeah, so you can search YouTube for Svelte Master or send me an email at sveltemaster@gmail.com. I am on Twitter, but I haven't been using it much, at Master Svelte.
Okay, cool. When I first started taking computer science classes in college, I thought programming was just a joke. In fact, I changed my major over to engineering and started doing computer engineering and chip design. Then I found Ruby and I fell in love. I love Ruby. It was my first real programming language where I dove deep and really learned how to make software that makes a difference for other people. Since then, and the way that we got started with devchat.tv, we started a show called Ruby Rogues. It's currently in the 400s of episodes. We've talked to hundreds of people in the Ruby community, about the Ruby programming language, about Rails, and about what makes good programming. So if you're interested in Ruby Rogues, or you just want to hear a long series of experienced programmers talking about real problems, then go check out rubyrogues.com. Well, let's go ahead and do some picks. Steve, do you want to start us off with some picks?
Sure. This came out of another podcast I did yesterday, but I'm going to pick a old-time movie. It's from 1955. It's called The Court Jester. And the star of the movie is Danny Kaye, who was very, very funny guy, very good actor, very athletic guy too. And it has a very young Angela Lansbury. I think she was like 20 at the time, and she looks like that. And then Glynis Johns, Mrs. Burns from Mary Poppins, Basil Rathbone, and just a number of great actors. But it's so funny. It's got more quotable lines than Better Off Dead, which is my all-time.
That's another classic one. Holy cow!
That's my all-time quotable movie. I have multiple shirts from that movie. But anyway, back to The Court Jester. Very funny movie. The acting is great. There's some incredible fencing scenes in there between Danny Kaye and I think it was Basil Rathbone. I don't remember who the other person was, but they did all their own fencing and stunts, so to speak. Just really great movie all around. It's definitely very, 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 very family friendly. But there's a lot of great lines about, get it, got it good, and the palace from the chalice from the palace, and the flagon with the dragon and the vessel with the pestle, and the brew that is true, and just some very fast and quick lines, exchanges that they do without error. That's just, it's awesome. So one of those all-time classics that I guess it's more of a cult classic than anything else. I don't see it mentioned in, the greatest movies of all times list, but definitely one worth seeing and one you watch over and over. I got to find it on DVD because I only have it on VHS, so I've had it for a long time, but definitely one worth watching.
Nice. I'm going to throw in a few picks. I'm first going to just tell you about the book. I think I mentioned on the last podcast, so I'll be really brief. If you're looking for a job, you're looking for some job mobility, then definitely go check it out. The Max Coder's Guide to Finding Your Dream Developer Job. We'll put a link in the show notes. Yeah, it's been out at this point for about a day and a half, and we've already sold. The day before it came out, my team actually listed it for free on Amazon. And so we had about 50 people pick it up that way, and then we've had about 75 or 80 people pick it up in the day and a half since. So totally awesome. I'm really digging it. So if you want to go check out the book, then definitely go check it out. I'm also going to pick these Christmas movies. I was planning on deciding what I was going to pick next week, right? I forgot that we had an extra episode this week. So I had to go back to my list and go, okay, what's next? So I'm going to pick two movies, again, that are just awesome movies. The first one is called The Bishop's Wife. I've seen it a couple of times. I've really enjoyed it every time that I've seen it. Cary Grant's in it.
Mr. Suave.
Yeah. Anyway.
David Niven.
Yeah.
He was a classic in some of the other all-time great movies, the Pink Panther movies. He's in one of those. So.
Yep.
Ooh, there's an Edwards in there too. That makes it even better.
There you go. So anyway, this bishop is trying to build a new cathedral in town. And so this angel comes to help him like repair his marriage and things like that. And yeah, it's awesome. Cary Grant is the angel, not the bishop. just to put that in there. But yeah, it's a terrific movie. I don't know if it's necessarily billed as a Christmas movie, but it really is a Christmas movie. So I'm going to pick that. Came out in 1947. The other movie that I'm going to pick that also came out in 1947, if I recall correctly, is Miracle on 34th Street. And how do I put it? They've made a new one since then. It's also really good, actually. Some of the remakes, I'm just like, oh, you ruined it. But yeah, this one, they did a really terrific job on it. Yeah, anyway, so I'm going to pick Miracle on 34th Street. It's a good, feel-good movie. Basically, Santa Claus comes to New York. Anyway, he winds up being put on trial, and they have to prove that he's Santa Claus to get him out. And there's a little girl that doesn't believe in Santa, but she wants to believe in Santa. And so, anyway.
Is that Natalie Wood? Is Natalie Wood the little girl?
I don't remember.
What? Yeah, she's got to be really young in this movie. I bet that's her. It's got Maureen O'Hara too, who was
Maureen O'Hara is the mother. Yeah,
she's awesome. She was like to act with John Wayne in a bunch of movies like McClintock and The Quiet Man.
Yes. The Quiet Man's a classic too.
Yeah, my wife and I have been
watching the movie. I'll pick that one later.
Yeah, my wife and I have been watching McClintock. It's been on like TCM. That's a pretty good movie too. It's sort of funny.
Yeah, such a terrific movie. So anyway, I'm going to pick that. I told you I'm picking older movies, so I can't pick the remake. But I guess I'll pick the remake. I'll fudge on this a little bit because the remake was good too, but the old one was just classic. And I remember watching that one every year as a kid. So yeah, go check those out. The Bishop's Wife and Miracle on 34th Street. I'm giving you all homework. Go watch some movies.
Okay.
Noah, do you have some picks for us?
Yeah, I've got one pick. It's this website called WaniKani. So I just started learning Japanese a few weeks ago, and this will help you to learn 2,000 kanji, 6,000 vocabulary words in just over a year. So it's kind of like a spaced repetition system, and you go through and get drilled on a bunch of kanji or.
So what are kanji? Words. Kanji, are those the symbols that they use to write?
Those like the Chinese symbols.
Right. Yeah. Okay.
Chinese characters. Yeah. So
and how many of those aren't there like 10,000 that they have to know, or some crazy number of symbols?
Yeah, there's a ton. Definitely tens of thousands. I think you just need to know about 2,000 to 3,000 to read a newspaper.
Oh, that's nothing. Yeah, easy piece of cake.
Easy, yeah. So this will help you do it.
We only have 26, so yeah.
Well, if you get uppercase and lowercase, I mean.
Oh, you're all the way up to 52 there. Then
I know.
Okay, wow, that's a lot closer.
Yeah, it gets pretty complicated. So yeah, that's my pick for anyone who's learning Japanese out there.
I'll have to check that out. I actually have the Pimsleur audio program on Audible that I bought to learn Japanese. I got it like a year and a half ago. It's something that I've always wanted to do.
Yeah, I've used that a bit.
I haven't gone through it yet. I'm such a lazy person.
Okay.
A busy person. That's what I meant. Busy person. But,
I think the extent of my Japanese is what I learned from Styx, Mr. Roboto, and the Sony commercials from the 80s.
Oh, nice.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you for coming, Noah.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me.
To our listeners, we will wrap this one up, and we will be back next week. Until then, max out.
Adios.
Bye.
Bandwidth for this segment is provided by CacheFly, the world's fastest CDN. Deliver your content fast with CacheFly. Visit CACHEFLY.com to learn more.